Hey guys, welcome back to the lab. Today is day 4 or part 4 of the Copper Cycle lab, and it's pretty cool. To recap, we began by explaining why we're doing such a complicated lab right off the bat, and the answer to that is to give you a preview of things that we're going to be doing throughout the entire year. Also to show you that everything that we're doing throughout the entire year is understandable and doable to an extent even right now. So we began by looking at the front page and talking about the glassware and equipment that we'll be using, and then we moved on to the second page and we talked about the chemicals, the elements, and the compounds. So an element and an element and an element, and I put them together and you have a compound. So that's interesting. And we talked about some of the different compounds that include things like sulfate and nitrate and oxide and hydroxides, which are ions. We discussed a little bit about bonding. We talked about reactants and products. Reactants on the left, yield sign, products on the right side. And we talked about a little bit about lab safety. Make sure you're wearing your goggles and an apron or a lab coat. And I gave you an assignment, and your assignment was to read the entire lab, and then once you've read the lab, come back to these questions and answer them, and I hope you did that. If you have any questions, always feel free to ask. After that, we began on the lab. We did steps 1 through 8 in the procedure. We weighed out 0.3 grams of copper. We talked about tare weights and things like that. You wrote down the reaction. We used graduated cylinders. We used the hot plate and the beaker. The last thing that we did was we filtered out this gray substance. And first thing I'll do is I'll scrape off this gray chemical into a weigh boat. Then after that, let's see, I made notes here. Made notes to myself. So scrape off the gray chemical. We'll add 20 milliliters of sulfuric acid. We'll stir it, heat it on the hot plate. Let me warm that up. And we'll filter and filter the stuff. We'll catch the chemical, the final chemical that we want in here, and then we'll dry this again, and then weigh it and see and talk about the final results. And then for the post lab, we'll do that on Zoom. So let's get started with today's lab. I believe this is step 9. It says gently scrape the dried solid from the filter paper into a small beaker using a scoopula. It's hard to get every last bit of the chemical, and honestly, this hasn't dried quite all the way overnight. But chemicals dropping in here. Hopefully I'm not losing too much of it. In every chemical reaction, set of reactions, you always lose some of the chemical, unfortunately. But it's something that we have to deal with, and something that we want to minimize. I got most of the chemical off there, but I'm missing a little bit. It says put it in a beaker. Let me do that. Put it in a small beaker. I believe it says add 20 milliliters of H2SO4. You notice that the instructions say 20 and then there's a little decimal on it, and that decimal indicates that I want to measure to the ones place. Now previously I said I think it was 30 to 35 milliliters of water, was it, in the previous lab, so that didn't matter, but today we want to be fairly precise. I want to get plus or minus 1 milliliter. So take my graduate cylinder and pour the sulfuric acid in there, and I want to get very close to 20 milliliters, not quite. Perfect. The bottom of the meniscus is resting in the top of the line. I'll add the sulfuric acid to the copper compound, and interestingly, some bubbling going on there, but the most important thing was it turned from gray to red almost right away, and now there's some blue in there as well. It says weigh 0.40 grams of zinc filings. So today I'm going to use electronic balance. The electronic balance 0.00 grams, so it's good to the hundredths place, and I placed my clean weigh boat on there. It says 2.21 grams, so I will write that down. Tare weight is 2.21 grams. I think you need to write that in your labs as well. And I'm supposed to take 0.4 grams of zinc. Here it is. And so 0.4 grams, 2.21 plus 0.40 grams is 2.6. I'm going to aim for 2.61 grams. zinc to this copper compound, which was blue. That means the copper has a +2 charge because each atom has 2 more pluses than minuses, 2 more protons than electrons. So I add the zinc and it starts to bubble. Chemical reaction is definitely occurring there. I'm supposed to stir it. So I have my trusty stir rod. There's some dark red stuff in the bottom of the beaker. I hope it looks reddish to you. And you'll notice that the blue color is kind of going away. So the copper atoms, the blue copper atoms, the one that had a +2 charge, seem to be going away. And this reddish stuff, which looks like a penny sort of, that's elemental copper. And so what we've done, turn to the last page of your lab if you'd like to. What we've done is we started off with pure elemental copper, and we went through reaction after reaction after reaction after reaction, and now we're back to pure elemental copper. So I need to leave this for a little while, and then I'm going to filter it after all the blue has gone away from the solution. That means all the copper is turned into elemental copper, and then I'm going to filter it, dry it, weigh it, and see if we got all of our copper back. So I've been stirring and heating the solution, and the blue copper 2 ions with a +2 charge appear to be gone. It's not blue anymore. So the last step in this whole lab is to take my filter paper, fold it in the appropriate way, in half, in a quarter, make sure I open it up properly. And the last thing is, try to get this copper into the filter paper. So some of the copper didn't come out, and so I'll take a wash bottle, add a little bit more water, pour it through, and voila. So you should be filling in all of these reactions right here, and to figure out what's going on, these are the reactions right here. You can also find them on the last page right here, because we started off with solid copper, we made copper nitrate, we made copper hydroxide, we made copper oxide, we made copper sulfate actually, not chloride, and then we're back to pure copper again. So that finishes up our lab, except for we need that number, the mass of the copper, and so I'll get that to you, and then we'll be ready to finish up the lab. I think I forgot to tell you that before I filtered out the copper, I weighed the filter paper, and the weight of the empty filter paper was 0.93 grams. Go over here to the electronic balance and pop the filter paper on that and see what the filter paper plus this final product, the copper that we were trying to recover, how much it weighs. 1.21 grams. So our math is going to be 1.21 grams, and that's the copper and the filter paper. So how much more is 1.21 than 0.93? So you can subtract this, 1.21 minus 0.93, and that will give you the weight of the copper. So can you do that math? I think you can. And we're all done. Let's just fill in the final details. Thank you.